The marble floor of the Sterling Grand Hotel reflected 1,000 points of light from the crystal chandeliers overhead, each surface polished to mirror perfection. Through the towering windows, Manhattan's skyline glittered against the December evening. But inside the lobby, warmth radiated from every corner: gold leaf accents, burgundy leather chairs, the soft murmur of wealth exchanging pleasantries. Evelyn Vinter moved through this world like she owned it, because in many ways she did. Her heels clicked a confident rhythm against the marble, her charcoal Armani suit tailored to command attention without demanding it. At 42, she had built an empire worth billions, and tonight's merger would add another crown jewel to her collection. The concierge nodded deeply as she passed. The bellhops straightened their spines. Even the air seemed to part before her. But then, between one step and the next, something shifted. The chandelier lights above began to pulse and blur. Her hand reached for the marble column, manicured nails scraping against stone as her knees buckled. The merger documents in her briefcase scattered across the floor like fallen leaves. Time slowed to honey as Evelyn Vinter, the woman who had never shown weakness in 20 years of business warfare, collapsed onto the cold marble with a sound that echoed through the suddenly silent lobby. Chaos erupted. Guests gasped and pulled out phones. The concierge fumbled for the emergency number. A woman in pearls screamed for a doctor, her voice cracking with panic. But from the corner where shadows gathered near the service elevator, a figure emerged, not running, but moving with deliberate purpose. Caleb Shepard pushed his janitor's cart aside, his gray uniform still damp with cleaning solution. His hands, roughened from years of manual labor, moved with the precision of a Swiss watch as he knelt beside Evelyn. While others stood frozen, he pressed 2 fingers to her carotid, counting beats that came too fast, too irregular, like a drummer who had lost the rhythm. Her breathing was shallow, labored. The crowd pressed closer, their expensive cologne mixing with the sharp scent of fear. Caleb's fingers traced her sternum, found the exact point between the 4th and 5th ribs. When he began chest compressions, someone shouted that he was hurting her. When he tilted her head back to clear her airway, the hotel manager tried to pull him away, insisting they wait for real medical help. But Caleb's hands never stopped moving. 30 compressions, 2 breaths, the rhythm of life itself. In the glass of the lobby windows, his reflection showed something the others couldn't see: the ghost of a man who had once held beating hearts in his palms, who had sutured arteries while mortars fell like rain in distant deserts. The lobby doors burst open. Lachlan Vinter entered like a storm system, his silver hair catching the light, his face a mask of controlled fury. He took in the scene: his sister on the floor, a janitor's hands on her chest, and his voice cut through the air like a blade. "Get your hands off her! Security! This man is assaulting my sister!" 2 guards moved forward, but Caleb didn't even look up. His world had narrowed to the woman beneath his hands, to the flutter beneath her ribs that told him her heart was fighting a war it was losing. He reached into her jacket pocket, found the small pill bottle, recognized the medication instantly: a beta blocker, precisely the wrong drug for someone whose heart was already struggling to find its rhythm. The ambulance sirens grew louder, closer. Paramedics rushed in with a stretcher, and only then did Caleb step back, his hands trembling, not from fear but from muscle memory, from years of not being able to use what he knew. As they loaded Evelyn onto the gurney, one paramedic glanced at the positioning of Caleb's compressions, the way he had maintained her airway, and nodded with professional respect. But Lachlan was already speaking to the hotel manager, his voice low and venomous. "That man touched my sister without consent, without qualification. I want him terminated immediately. I want charges pressed." The manager, caught between the city's most powerful family and what he had witnessed, chose the path of least resistance. As the ambulance pulled away, its lights painting the lobby walls red and blue, Caleb Shepard found himself suspended without pay, his janitor's badge confiscated, the ghost of his past threatening to emerge from the shadows he had worked so hard to build. The apartment building stood like a tired soldier on the edge of Queens, its brick facade weathered but dignified, holding stories in every crack and water stain. 5 floors up, behind a door marked 5C, Caleb Shepard lived a life measured in small victories and careful routines. The living room was sparse but immaculate: a worn couch covered with a handmade quilt, a coffee table marked by rings from countless mugs, walls decorated with a 7-year-old's artwork that transformed the modest space into a gallery of dreams. Each drawing was signed Nora S. in crayon letters that grew steadier with each passing month. Nora herself sat cross-legged on the carpet, her dark curls falling over her face as she worked on her latest creation. Purple crayon in hand, she was drawing what she called her guardian dragon, its wings spread wide enough to protect everyone she loved. The dragon had become her signature, appearing in various forms across dozens of papers, sometimes breathing protective fire, sometimes curled around a small house, always purple, always watching. Caleb watched her from the kitchen doorway, his hands wrapped around a mug of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. In moments like these, the weight of his choices felt both crushing and justified. She was safe here. That was all that mattered. The television murmured in the background, local news cycling through stories of corporate mergers and winter weather warnings. When Evelyn Vinter's face appeared on screen, described as fighting for her life at Mount Sinai, Nora looked up. "Daddy, is that the lady from your work?" She had the uncanny ability to absorb information, even when seemingly focused on her art. Caleb nodded, moving to turn off the television, but Nora had already returned to her dragon. "You'll help her, won't you? Like you help everyone?" The innocence in her voice was a knife between his ribs. She didn't know about the hospital badge hidden in the lockbox beneath his bed, the medical degree from Johns Hopkins gathering dust, the combat surgeon certification that had once meant everything and now meant danger. 5 years ago, Caleb had been Dr. Shepard, attached to a special operations unit in Afghanistan. His hands had worked miracles in field hospitals where electricity was a luxury and sterile conditions a dream. He had saved lives that others had written off, pulled soldiers back from the edge when their blood painted the desert sand. But then came the incident, a warlord's son on his operating table, a successful surgery, and the terrible mistake of saving the wrong life. The boy's father had been grateful until he discovered his son had been captured because of information Caleb's unit had acted on. The warlord's revenge was patient and thorough. First came the threats, then the assassination attempt that missed Caleb but killed 2 nurses. When intelligence suggested the warlord's reach extended to American soil, Caleb made the only choice a father could make. Dr. Shepard died in paperwork, and Caleb the janitor was born. Mrs. Gable from next door knocked gently before entering, as was her way. The 70-year-old widow had become their unofficial grandmother. Watching Nora when Caleb worked nights, teaching her to knit, filling the maternal void with quiet grace. "Suspended from work, I heard," she said softly, her Irish accent still thick after 40 years in New York. "The whole building's talking about how you saved that rich lady." Caleb's jaw tightened. Attention was the last thing they needed. But Mrs. Gable wasn't finished. "That little one needs her father to be who he really is, not who fear makes him pretend to be." She left a casserole on the counter and departed, but her words lingered like smoke. That night, after Nora had fallen asleep clutching her purple dragon drawing, Caleb stood at the window watching the city lights blur through winter frost. His phone, a burner replaced every month, buzzed with a message from Echo, the hacker who had helped him disappear. Saw the news. "Your cover's intact for now, but Lachlan Vinter is digging. Be careful, brother." Caleb deleted the message, knowing that careful wasn't enough anymore. In trying to save a life, he might have exposed the one he was protecting. Through the thin walls, he could hear Nora's peaceful breathing, unaware that her father's past was circling like sharks drawn to blood in the water. The purple dragon on her nightstand seemed to watch him, its crayon eyes holding a question he couldn't answer. How long could a man hide from who he really was? The executive floor of Mount Sinai Hospital was a world apart from the chaos below, all private rooms and hushed conversations, where money could buy silence as easily as treatment. In the corner suite, Evelyn Vinter lay unconscious, her body a battlefield of monitors and IV lines. The steady beep of her heart monitor provided a mechanical rhythm to the room, each sound a small victory against death. But in the hallway outside, her brother Lachlan was orchestrating something far more sinister than anyone could imagine. He stood with Dr. Marcus Holden, the hospital's chief of cardiology, a man whose gambling debts had made him vulnerable to certain pressures. Lachlan's voice was silk over steel as he handed Holden a medical file that shouldn't have existed. "My sister's previous physician in Switzerland diagnosed a mild arrhythmia. She's been successfully managed on metoprolol for years. I'm sure you'll want to continue her established treatment. The file was a masterwork of deception, complete with falsified EKGs and fictional consultation notes. Holden's hands shook slightly as he reviewed it. He knew what Lachlan was really asking to administer a drug that, if Evelyn actually had Brugada syndrome as her collapse suggested, would stop her heart as surely as a bullet. But Holden also knew what happened to those who disappointed the Vinter family. 3 floors down, in the hospital's utility basement where janitors took their breaks, Caleb sat in darkness with his encrypted phone, speaking to a ghost from his past. Echo's voice crackled through the secure connection, his fingers dancing across keyboards thousands of miles away. The medical files were uploaded to the hospital system 20 minutes ago, Echo reported. But here's the interesting part: they were created yesterday, after Evelyn's collapse. Someone's rewriting her medical history, and I think we both know why. Caleb closed his eyes, seeing the pattern clearly. The beta blocker in Evelyn's pocket, the convenient new diagnosis. Lachlan's insistence on removing anyone who might question it. This wasn't negligence. It was murder dressed in medical terminology. The risk calculation was brutal but simple. If Caleb did nothing, Evelyn Vinter would die within days. Her heart stopping quietly in the night, ruled a tragic but natural death. If he acted, he would expose himself, potentially bringing the warlord's vengeance to Nora's doorstep. His daughter's purple dragon drawing was folded in his pocket, a talisman against the darkness of the choice. But as he thought of Nora's question, "You'll help her, won't you?" he knew the decision was already made. Some men could walk past suffering. Caleb Shepard, whether janitor or doctor, had never been one of them. That evening, Caleb made his way back to the Sterling Grand Hotel, not through the gleaming front entrance but through the loading dock where deliveries arrived and garbage departed. His suspension meant nothing to the service staff who knew him as the quiet man who never complained about the worst shifts. He found who he was looking for in the underground parking garage: David Peterson, Evelyn's personal assistant, a young man whose loyalty to his boss was legendary but whose fear was now palpable. Peterson was sitting in his Tesla, staring at his phone with hollow eyes. The attempted murder of his boss was playing out above his head, and he knew it but felt powerless to stop it. When Caleb tapped on the window, Peterson nearly jumped out of his skin. His first instinct was to drive away, but something in Caleb's eyes held him. "I don't know what you want," Peterson stammered, "but I've been told not to speak to you, mister. Vinter said you're trying to exploit the situation, maybe blackmail the family." Caleb's response was measured, clinical. "Evelyn is being given metoprolol, a beta-adrenergic blocker. If she has Brugada syndrome, which her collapse pattern suggests, that drug will cause ventricular fibrillation. She'll be dead within 72 hours. The medical terminology, delivered with absolute precision, cut through Peterson's fear. This wasn't the rambling of a janitor. This was expertise. "How could you possibly know?" Peterson began, then stopped. The pieces were falling into place the way Caleb had performed CPR, the immediate recognition of danger, the medical knowledge no janitor should possess. "Who are you?" he whispered. Caleb leaned closer, his voice urgent but calm. "I'm someone who took an oath to do no harm. And right now, that oath is the only thing standing between your boss and a grave. I need you to get a message to Dr. Tanaka in the ICU. Tell her to run a procainamide challenge. Don't mention my name. Just say you overheard concerned family discussing getting a second opinion about Brugada syndrome. She'll know what to do." Peterson's hands gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles went white. "If I do this, and Lachlan finds out," the threat didn't need to be voiced. They both knew Lachlan Vinter destroyed those who opposed him. But Peterson thought of Evelyn, who had hired him when no one else would, who had mentored him, who had treated him like family rather than furniture. "She saved my life once," he said quietly. "When my mother was sick, she paid for treatment insurance wouldn't cover, never asked for anything in return." He looked at Caleb with newfound determination. "I'll get the message to Dr. Tanaka. But after this, we never spoke. You understand?" Caleb nodded and melted back into the shadows of the parking garage. One Piece was in motion. Now all he could do was wait and hope that professional curiosity would overcome political pressure. Dr. Sarah Tanaka stood at the foot of Evelyn Vinter's bed at 3 a.m, the ICU quiet except for the symphony of machines keeping watch over the critical. She held the message Peterson had nervously delivered, his suggestion about Brugada syndrome written on hospital stationery to seem official. Tanaka had worked in cardiac intensive care for 15 years, had seen enough to know when something didn't add up. The beta blocker prescription, the sudden collapse in an otherwise healthy woman, the family's insistence on a specific treatment protocol, it all screamed of something wrong. But challenging the Vinter family's wishes was career suicide at best. She looked through the glass partition to where Lachlan Vinter sat in the waiting area, his presence a constant reminder of who controlled the narrative. But Tanaka had become a doctor to save lives, not to be complicit in ending them. She made her decision. "We're going to run a procainamide challenge," she told the night nurse, keeping her voice clinical, routine. "Standard diagnostic protocol for suspected Brugada syndrome." The nurse looked concerned. "Dr. Holden specifically said to maintain current treatment." Tanaka's jaw set with determination. "And I'm specifically saying we need a complete diagnostic workup. If Holden has a problem with that, he can come down here and explain to me why we're not following standard cardiac protocols." The preparation took an hour. The procainamide had to be carefully dosed, the crash cart positioned nearby, the defibrillator charged and ready. Tanaka administered the drug slowly, watching the monitors with the intensity of a hawk tracking prey. For the first 10 minutes, nothing changed. Evelyn's heart maintained its drug rhythm, steady but artificial. Lachlan had somehow appeared in the observation area, his eyes cold as winter frost. "I heard you're deviating from the prescribed treatment," he said softly. The threat implicit. "My sister's care should follow established protocols." Tanaka didn't look away from the monitors. "This is established protocol, Mr. Vinter. Unless you have a medical degree I'm unaware of." 20 minutes in, the EKG began to change. The ST segment started to rise, the characteristic coved pattern of Brugada syndrome emerging like a signature written in electricity. Tanaka's breath caught. It was textbook, undeniable. "Get the metoprolol out of her system now," she ordered, her voice cutting through the ICU. "Start quinidine, prepare for cardioversion if needed." The nurses moved with practiced efficiency, but it was already starting. Evelyn's heart, poisoned by the very drug meant to help her, began to stutter. The regular beeping became erratic, then screaming alarms as ventricular fibrillation took hold. "She's in VFib!" The crash team descended like a well-trained army, the defibrillator charged with its distinctive whine. Clear. The shock arced through Evelyn's body, lifting her chest off the bed. Nothing. Again. Charged to 360. Another shock. The room held its breath. Then, like an engine catching after multiple attempts, a rhythm returned, irregular, fragile, but real. Tanaka worked for another hour, stabilizing, adjusting, fighting for every beat. Through the glass, she saw Lachlan's face had gone pale, his mask slipping for just a moment to reveal something that looked like fury mixed with fear. But there was another observer, standing in the hallway where the ICU connected to the service corridor. Caleb Shepard watched through a narrow window that most people didn't know existed, his janitor's uniform making him invisible to those focused on the drama inside. He saw Tanaka's discovery, saw Evelyn's heart stop and restart, saw Lachlan's rage. Most importantly, he saw Lachlan pull out his phone and dial a number, his lips forming words that Caleb could read even from a distance. "Find him. Find the janitor. Tonight." The hunter had become the hunted. Caleb disappeared into the service tunnels, knowing he had hours, maybe less, before Lachlan's resources found him. But at least Evelyn Vinter would live. The first battle was won, but the war was just beginning. The apartment building was quiet at 4 a.m, the hour when even the city that never sleeps allows itself to doze. But in apartment 5C, Caleb Shepard was in motion, filling a backpack with the precision of a man who had packed for evacuation before. Passports in false names, cash in small bills, the encrypted phone, a single change of clothes for him and 3 for Nora. The purple dragon drawing went in last, folded carefully and placed in a zippered pocket. He moved to wake his daughter, his hand gentle on her shoulder, when the burner phone buzzed. Grant Maddox's voice was granite and gravel. "They're coming. 2 SUVs just pulled up outside. You've got maybe 3 minutes." Maddox was the Sterling Grant's head of security, a former Marine who had recognized something familiar in Caleb's bearing. The way he moved, the thousand-yard stare of someone who had seen too much. He had been watching the hotel's cameras when he saw Lachlan's security team accessing employee files, pulling Caleb's address. Professional courtesy between warriors demanded a warning. There's a service ladder on the north side of your building, Maddox continued. Leads to the adjacent roof. Mrs. Gable's already getting the same wake-up call. Move now, brother. Caleb scooped Nora into his arms, her small body warm with sleep. We're going on an adventure, he whispered as her eyes fluttered open. Remember the fire drill practice? Just like that? She nodded, instantly alert despite her age. Trained by a father who had made emergency preparedness into bedtime games. They slipped into the hallway just as the elevator dinged at the far end. Caleb turned the opposite direction, toward the stairwell, but heard boots already echoing up from below. The trap was closing. Mrs. Gable appeared in her doorway, fully dressed despite the hour, her elderly face set with determination. This way, she hissed, leading them to a maintenance door hidden behind a false panel she apparently knew about. Lived here 40 years, boy. You think you're the first one who needed to disappear? The narrow passage smelled of rust and age, barely wide enough for an adult. They could hear apartment doors being kicked open behind them, voices shouting commands. Nora buried her face in Caleb's shoulder, but didn't make a sound, brave in the way children become when they sense true danger. They emerged onto the roof as the first pink threads of dawn touched the Manhattan skyline. The December wind cut like a scalpel, but Caleb didn't hesitate. He could see Maddox on the adjacent building, having somehow commandeered the rooftop access. Jump! Maddox shouted. The gap was 8 feet, doable for Caleb alone, nearly impossible carrying a child. But as doors burst open behind them and men with guns emerged, impossible became irrelevant. Caleb backed up, clutched Nora tighter, whispered, "Trust me," and ran. The edge approached like destiny itself. His foot hit the ledge and he leaped, Manhattan sprawling dizzyingly below. For a moment they were flying, suspended between buildings, between lives. Then Maddox's hands caught them, pulled them to safety as bullets cracked against the concrete where they had been standing. The chase continued through 3 more buildings, a labyrinth of rooftops and service corridors that Maddox navigated like a man who had studied every escape route in the city. Behind them, Lachlan's men were systematic but slower, handicapped by their assumption that a janitor with a child couldn't possibly evade professional security. They reached Maddox's car, a reinforced SUV that he apparently kept for situations exactly like this. As they pulled away, Caleb saw one of Lachlan's men photographing the vehicle, already coordinating the next phase of pursuit. Safe house in Newark, Maddox said, eyes constantly checking mirrors. But this ain't over. Men like Lachlan Vinter don't forgive being made to look foolish. Through it all, Nora clutched her purple dragon drawing, pulled from Caleb's backpack, as if it truly could protect them from the monsters that wore expensive suits instead of scales. Consciousness returned to Evelyn Vinter like a tide. Slow at first, then all at once. The ICU was bright with morning sunlight, the crisis of the night before evident only in the exhaustion on Dr. Tanaka's face and the proliferation of monitors surrounding the bed. Evelyn's throat was raw from intubation. Her chest ached from the defibrillation. But her mind was sharp as the Waterford crystal on her office desk. She remembered the collapse, the janitor's hands on her chest, the darkness that followed. But most of all, she remembered the feeling just before falling, that sense of wrongness, as if her own body had betrayed her. Lachlan was there within minutes of her waking, his concern so perfectly performed that anyone watching would have thought him the devoted brother. "Thank God you're all right," he said, taking her hand with just the right amount of emotion. "We almost lost you. If I hadn't insisted on reviewing your medication protocol, if I hadn't pushed for the right treatment." But Evelyn had built an empire by reading lies in boardrooms, and her brother's performance had tells the way his eyes didn't quite meet hers, the pause before right treatment, the subtle tension in his jaw. She had seen him lie to investors with the same practiced ease. "Tell me what happened," she said, her voice hoarse but commanding. Lachlan launched into a story of medical heroics, of his quick thinking and decisive action. But Dr. Tanaka, checking monitors nearby, cleared her throat slightly. "You were given a medication that was contraindicated for your condition," the doctor said carefully, professionally. "We caught it during a diagnostic test. An external consultation had suggested we look for Brugada syndrome, and they were right. Lachlan's hand tightened on Evelyn's just a fraction. Some janitor was spreading rumors, trying to insert himself into the situation. I've handled it, but Evelyn's mind was already working, processing data like the CEO she was. The janitor who had saved her, who somehow knew about Brugada syndrome. The convenient new medical history Lachlan referenced. The medication that nearly killed her. She had built her fortune by seeing patterns others missed, and this pattern was painting itself in blood. I want to speak to the janitor, she said quietly. Lachlan's mask slipped for just a moment. He's been suspended. Probably gone by now. You don't need. But Evelyn was already reaching for her phone, calling Saren, her bodyguard who had been with her since Amsterdam, whose loyalty was absolute. Find the janitor from the Sterling Grand, the one who saved me. Bring him to me. And Sauron? Don't let my brother know. That afternoon, as Lachlan attended to urgent business elsewhere, Evelyn received a visitor Dr. Tanaka hadn't logged. David Peterson slipped into her room, his face drawn with the weight of secrets. Miss Vinter, he began, then stopped, started again. The janitor, Caleb Shepard. He knew. He knew about the medication, about your condition. He sent me to warn Dr. Tanaka. Peterson pulled out his phone, showed her the employee file, then something else, a news article from 5 years ago about a doctor, Caleb Shepard, a combat surgeon who had disappeared after saving the wrong life in Afghanistan. The photograph was older, the man military clean rather than worn down, but the eyes were the same. Evelyn studied the information like she studied acquisition targets, seeing the full picture emerge. A doctor hiding as a janitor. A brother who had tried to have her killed. A man who had risked his hidden life to save hers. She thought of her father, how he had always said Lachlan's ambition would consume them all eventually. She had been blind, allowing family loyalty to override her instincts. But now, lying in a hospital bed with machinery keeping her alive, she saw everything with the clarity that comes from nearly losing it all. Mr. Peterson, she said, her voice gaining strength with each word. I need you to arrange a meeting, quietly, and I need you to access the family trust servers. Download everything from the last 6 months. If my brother wants to play games with my life, he's about to learn why I've never lost a hostile takeover. The safe house was a cabin 90 minutes north of the city, hidden in the woods near the Delaware Water Gap. Maddox had acquired it through channels that didn't require paperwork, a place where men with complicated pasts could disappear when needed. Caleb stood at the window watching Nora play in the snow, her laughter carrying through the glass as she built a snowman with Mrs. Gable. For a moment, just a moment, it felt like they might have escaped. But his phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. The person you saved would like to thank you in person. Tonight, come alone. This is Sauron. Attached was a photo of Sauron holding today's newspaper. Evelyn visible in the hospital bed behind him. It could be a trap. Lachlan could have forced Evelyn to participate, could have her bodyguard under his control. Every instinct Caleb had developed in 5 years of hiding screamed danger. But he thought of Evelyn's eyes in that moment before she collapsed, the fierce intelligence there, the way she had fought against the darkness pulling her down. Some chances had to be taken, some trusts extended, or life became nothing more than existence. He kissed Nora's forehead as she slept that evening, whispered to Mrs. Gable to keep the doors locked, and drove back toward the city in Maddox's second car, toward either salvation or destruction. The meeting was in a closed restaurant in Chinatown, the kind of place where privacy could be purchased and questions weren't asked. Caleb entered through the kitchen, his hand near the concealed knife he always carried, every nerve on edge. Evelyn was there, in a wheelchair she clearly despised, IV port still visible on her hand. Sauron stood behind her, massive and immobile as a mountain. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then Evelyn said, Dr. Shepard, I assume. My brother is trying to kill you. He's already killed me, or tried to. I'd like to discuss a mutual solution to our Lachlan problem. The conversation that followed was part interrogation, part negotiation, part confession. Caleb explained his history, the warlord, the need to hide. Evelyn revealed what she had discovered: Lachlan's debts to Russian oligarchs, his need for her inheritance, the systematic way he had been positioning himself to take over if she died. He's not just trying to kill me, she said, showing Caleb documents on her tablet. He's been selling company secrets, compromising national security contracts. If I die, he doesn't just get money, he gets access to Defense Department databases, classified military suppliers. The weight of it settled on Caleb like body armor, heavy but necessary. This wasn't just about saving one life anymore, but his concern was simpler, more primal. He's hunting my daughter, he said quietly. Nothing else matters if she's not safe. Evelyn leaned forward, her eyes intense despite her physical weakness. Then we end this. Tonight. I know where he'll be, our father's old cabin upstate. He goes there when he needs to feel powerful, to plan where no one can hear. If we can get evidence of what he's doing, record him admitting to it, we can end this legally. Sauron spoke for the first time, his Dutch accent thick. Or we could end it more directly. But Evelyn shook her head. We're not him. We do this right. Or we become the monsters we're fighting. They spent 2 hours planning, using Evelyn's resources and Caleb's tactical knowledge. Echo was brought in via encrypted connection, his fingers already dancing through Lachlan's digital footprint. Maddox would provide backup, Sauron would protect Evelyn, and Caleb would be bait, drawing Lachlan out, making him confess. It was dangerous, probably foolish, certainly desperate, but as they prepared to leave, Evelyn grabbed Caleb's arm. Why? She asked. You could have walked away, let me die, stayed safe. Why risk everything? Caleb thought of Nora's purple dragon, of protection and courage, of the oath he had taken so many years ago. Because some things are worth more than safety, he said. Sometimes the only way to protect what matters is to stop hiding from who you really are. The cabin squatted in the darkness like a predator waiting to strike, its windows glowing yellow against the snow-covered pines. Lachlan's Bentley was parked outside, along with 2 security SUVs. He had brought muscle, expecting trouble. What he hadn't expected was for Caleb to walk up to the front door and knock, bold as daylight. The door opened to a gun barrel, one of Lachlan's men ready to fire. But Lachlan's voice called out from inside, "Let him in. Dr. Shepard and I need to talk." The interior was all masculine luxury leather and dark wood, hunting trophies and expensive whiskey. Lachlan sat by the fireplace, a glass of scotch in his hand, looking like a man who had already won. "Doctor," he said, the title mocking, "I should thank you. If you hadn't saved my sister, her death would have been investigated. Now, when she passes from complications, it will be tragic but natural." Caleb remained standing, every muscle coiled. "She knows," he said simply. "She knows everything. The falsified medical records, the assassination attempt, the debts to Moscow." For the first time, Lachlan's composure cracked. He stood, the firelight casting his shadow huge against the wall. "You're lying." But his hand was already moving to his phone, calling his sources at the hospital. The phone rang again, no answer. He tried another number, then another. Nothing. "She's gone," Caleb said. "Discharged herself an hour ago. By now, she's downloaded everything from your private servers. The FBI will have it all by morning." It was a bluff. But Lachlan didn't know that. His face contorted with rage, the careful mask finally shattering completely. "That bitch," he snarled. "I spent 30 years in her shadow, 30 years of being second best. Do you know what it's like to be the spare heir? To watch her get everything, father's approval, the company, the power, while I got scraps?" He began to pace, the words pouring out like poison from a lanced wound. "Father knew what I was capable of. But he chose her. Said I was too aggressive, too ambitious. But ambition is what built our empire. She just maintained it, played it safe. I would have made us kings." The confession continued, Lachlan detailing his plans, his connections, how he had orchestrated everything. Hidden in Caleb's collar, Echo's micro-recorder captured every word. But then Lachlan stopped, his eyes narrowing. "You're too calm," he said slowly. "You're not afraid." "Why aren't you?" He pulled his gun just as the lights went out. The cabin plunged into darkness, only the fireplace providing flickering illumination. Maddox had cut the power from outside. In the confusion, Caleb moved, years of combat training taking over. He rolled behind the couch, as Lachlan fired, the muzzle flash strobing the room. Security guards stumbled in the darkness, shouting, crashing into furniture. Caleb's knife found one man's gun hand, disarming him with surgical precision. Another flash, another roll. The room became a chaos of shadows and violence. Men fighting men they couldn't fully see. Lachlan backed toward the fireplace, trying to use its light to his advantage. "I'll kill your daughter," he screamed into the darkness. "I'll find her and make you watch." That was his mistake. The threat to Nora transformed Caleb from a man trying to survive into something more primal. He came out of the darkness like vengeance itself, tackling Lachlan into the stone fireplace. They crashed to the ground, rolling, punching, each trying to gain control of the gun. Lachlan was younger, stronger, but Caleb had been forged in places where losing meant more than death. The gun went off, the bullet shattering a window. They rolled again, and this time Caleb got his hand on Lachlan's wrist, applying pressure to the nerve cluster he knew would cause the fingers to spasm open. The gun clattered away. But Lachlan wasn't finished. He grabbed a poker from the fireplace, swung it at Caleb's head. Caleb ducked, the metal whistling past his ear, and drove his elbow into Lachlan's solar plexus. As Lachlan doubled over, gasping, the cabin door exploded inward. Soren entered first, his bulk filling the doorframe, followed by Maddox. The remaining security guards, seeing the odds had shifted, dropped their weapons. Lachlan made one last desperate lunge for his gun, but Caleb was there first, kicking it into the fireplace where it discharged harmlessly into the logs. They stood facing each other, both breathing hard, blood trickling from various wounds. "It's over," Caleb said. Lachlan laughed, bitter and broken. "You think you've won? You have no idea what you've done. The people I owe don't forgive debts. They'll come for her, for you, for everyone you love." But even as he spoke, they could hear sirens approaching through the woods. Evelyn had kept her promise the FBI was coming. As the red and blue lights painted the snow outside, Lachlan Vinter, heir to billions, fell to his knees. The empire he had tried to steal through murder was crumbling, and he would watch it fall from a federal prison cell. The FBI operation was swift and thorough. Lachlan was arrested on charges ranging from attempted murder to treason. The evidence Echo had gathered painting a picture of corruption that reached into the highest levels of corporate America. The Russian connections alone would keep prosecutors busy for years. Evelyn, despite her weakened state, took control of the narrative with the precision of a general directing a campaign. Press conferences were held, statements released, the family company's stock protected through careful management of information. Within a week, Lachlan Vinter had gone from heir apparent to federal prisoner awaiting trial without bail. But for Caleb, the victory felt hollow until he could hold his daughter again. He drove back to the cabin where Nora waited, the sunrise painting the sky the same purple as her guardian dragon. She ran to him across the snow, her small arms wrapping around his neck with fierce strength. "I knew you'd come back," she whispered. "My dragon told me you would." "Mrs." Gable stood in the doorway, tears streaming down her weathered face. "About time you stopped running, boy," she said. "That little girl deserves a father who stands tall, not one who hides in shadows." That evening, Evelyn arrived at the cabin, no longer in a wheelchair but moving carefully, deliberately. She had discharged herself against medical advice, but her will was stronger than any doctor's orders. She sat with Nora, admiring the purple dragon drawings, speaking to the child with the same respect she gave board members. "Your father saved my life," she told Nora. "He's a hero." Nora nodded solemnly. "I know. He saves people. That's what he does." The simple certainty in the child's voice moved something in Evelyn that hadn't stirred in years. Later, after Nora had fallen asleep, Evelyn made an offer. "I've been thinking about my father's legacy," she said to Caleb. "He built hospitals before he built companies. There's a medical center in Queens that needs a new director. Someone who understands that medicine isn't about money but about service. The position comes with a new identity, completely legal, fully backstopped. Dr. Marcus Shore, if you're interested. Close enough to your real name that Nora won't have to adjust." Caleb's throat tightened. "Why would you do this?" Evelyn smiled, the first genuine smile he had seen from her. "Because my brother was right about one thing. I've played it safe for too long. It's time to take some risks on people who deserve them." The transition took 3 months. The warlord who had hunted Caleb was killed in a drone strike. His organization scattered. The threat finally ended. Caleb legally became Dr. Marcus Shore, his credentials transferred, his past officially closed. The medical center in Queens was transformed with Evelyn's funding into a state-of-the-art facility that never turned anyone away for inability to pay. Maddox took over as Evelyn's head of security, his loyalty to both her and Caleb creating an unbreakable triangle of trust. Even Mrs. Gable found a new role, running the Children's Activity Center where her grandmotherly presence soothed the most frightened young patients. The grand opening was on a perfect spring day, the kind that made New York City feel like a promise rather than a challenge. The sign read Shepherd Medical Center. Evelyn had insisted on keeping the real name, saying secrets had caused enough damage. Veterans received free treatment, families found support, and in the pediatric ward, the walls were covered with purple dragons, all painted by a local 7-year-old artist named Nora Shore. Caleb stood in surgical scrubs for the first time in 5 years, his hands steady, his purpose clear. He had hidden from his calling, but purpose, like truth, always finds a way to surface. The sun was setting over the East River, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold that reminded everyone of Nora's guardian dragon. 5 years had passed since that night in the Vintner cabin, 5 years of healing, growth, and redemption. The Shepherd Medical Center had become a beacon in Queens, treating over 10,000 patients who otherwise would have gone without care. The courtyard was filled with families celebrating the center's 5th anniversary, children playing on equipment donated by the Vintner Foundation, veterans sharing stories over coffee and understanding. Caleb, now fully Dr. Marcus Shore, in legal terms, but still Caleb to those who mattered, stood watching his daughter, now 12, help younger children with art projects. Nora had grown tall and confident. Her artistic talents evolved from purple dragons to complex murals that decorated the hospital walls. She still drew dragons sometimes, but now they were guardians of hope rather than fear, protectors of dreams rather than secrets. Her laugh carried across the courtyard as she helped a young patient paint, the same laugh that had kept Caleb human through the darkest times. Evelyn arrived in her typical fashion quietly, without fanfare, her power now expressed through presence rather than performance. She had aged gracefully, the near-death experience having shifted her priorities from conquest to legacy. Her company had tripled in value, but more importantly to her, it now funded 17 medical centers across the country. Ask Dr. Shore, she said, using the name with a small smile that acknowledged their shared fiction. I have a proposition. She handed him a folder plans for an international medical corps, doctors who would go where others wouldn't, save lives others had written off. I thought you might know someone interested in running it. You never stop, do you? Caleb asked. But he was already reading, already planning. Evelyn watched Nora teaching the younger children, her expression soft. Your daughter asked me once why I helped her father. I told her it was because he helped me first. But that wasn't the whole truth. She paused, choosing words carefully. The truth is, saving your life saved mine in ways that had nothing to do with medicine. I spent 40 years building walls, creating distance, mistaking isolation for strength. You and Nora showed me that strength comes from connection, from the courage to trust despite the risk. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the celebration, Peterson approached with his own family, a wife and twin boys, who immediately ran to join Nora's art class. He had risen to become Evelyn's chief of operations, his loyalty during the crisis, having proven his worth beyond any resume. Miss Vintner, Dr. Shore, he nodded to both. The senator is here for the ceremony. They had invited officials to mark the anniversary, to celebrate what public-private partnership could accomplish when ego was set aside for purpose. But Caleb's attention was drawn to an elderly woman being wheeled in by her grandson, her eyes bright with recognition. She had been his first patient when the center opened, a terminal diagnosis that he had somehow wrestled into remission. Her survival had become the center's first miracle, the story that brought others hope. The ceremony was simple. Speeches kept short because the work spoke louder than words. But when Nora took the microphone to thank everyone for coming to her dad's hospital, the crowd fell silent. 5 years ago, she said, her young voice carrying surprising authority, my dad taught me that sometimes we have to hide to stay safe. But he also taught me that hiding forever isn't living. This place exists because people decided to stop hiding from their gifts. from their purpose, from each other. My dad says medicine is about healing, but I think it's about more than that. It's about believing that broken things can be made whole, that people who fall can stand again, that even in the darkest moments, someone will reach out their hand to help. She held up a new painting, unveiled it for the crowd, a dragon, purple as always. But this one was different. Its wings sheltered not a house but a hospital, and in its claws, it held not weapons but olive branches. Around it, smaller dragons of every color formed a circle, each protecting the others. This is for everyone who stopped hiding, Nora said, looking directly at her father. For everyone brave enough to be who they really are. The applause was thunderous, but Caleb barely heard it. His daughter, wise beyond her years, had articulated what he had spent 5 years trying to understand. That night, after the crowds had gone and the courtyard was quiet, Caleb stood in his office, really his now, no longer feeling like a costume he was wearing. The walls held degrees, certifications, photos of successful surgeries and grateful families. But the centerpiece was Nora's original purple dragon, now framed, the childish crayon strokes preserved behind museum glass. A knock at the door interrupted his reflection. Evelyn entered, followed by someone unexpected, Dr. Tanaka, the ICU physician who had saved Evelyn's life by listening to an anonymous warning. Dr. Tanaka has agreed to head our new cardiac unit, Evelyn announced. She says someone once told her that medicine is about following instincts, not politics. I thought you should be the first to know. Tanaka stepped forward, extending her hand. I never got to thank the person who sent that message about the procainamide challenge, she said, her eyes knowing. Whoever it was saved more than one life that night. Caleb shook her hand, understanding passing between them without words. Some truths were better left unspoken. Some heroes better left anonymous. As they stood together in the office, 3 people who had found each other in the darkness of crisis. The city lights sparkled beyond the windows like stars brought to earth. Somewhere in the pediatric ward, a child was being told they would live. Somewhere in the veterans unit, a soldier was finding peace. Somewhere in Queens, a mother was learning her son's surgery would be covered. No questions asked. The Shepherd Medical Center stood as testament to what could be built when people chose courage over comfort, truth over safety, purpose over fear. Evelyn's phone buzzed with a message from her board, another acquisition approved, another hospital to be funded. She had become richer by giving money away, her company's reputation soaring as her brother's legacy crumbled. Lachlan was serving life without parole, his testimony having brought down a Russian crime syndicate. He had written her once from prison, asking for forgiveness. She had sent back a single line, "Forgiveness is earned through change, not words." She hadn't heard from him since. There's something else, Evelyn said as they prepared to leave. The Pentagon contacted me. They've heard about our work with veterans, the success rate with PTSD treatment. They want to fund an expansion, a national network. She looked at Caleb meaningfully. They specifically asked if Dr. Marcus Shore would consider consulting on combat-related trauma. The irony wasn't lost on any of them, the man who had hidden from the military now being sought by it for his expertise. But Caleb had learned that running from the past only gave it power. I'll consider it, he said, but only if we maintain complete medical independence. No politics, no agendas, just healing. As they walked through the hospital, passing rooms where lives were being saved and futures rewritten, Caleb thought about the journey that had brought them here. From a hotel lobby where a janitor saved a CEO, through violence and betrayal, to this place of healing and hope. Every choice had carried risk. Every trust could have been betrayed, but they had chosen to believe in something better than mere survival. They had chosen to believe in each other. The parking lot was nearly empty. The night shift, settling into their routines. Evelyn's driver waited by her Bentley, not the same model her brother had driven. She had sold all of those, choosing substance over show. Same time next year? She asked. Though they all knew they would meet much sooner. The work never stopped, the need never diminished. But that was the point, to be needed, to be useful, to transform suffering into healing. As her car pulled away, Caleb walked to his own vehicle. A practical SUV with a proud parent sticker Nora had insisted on. The drive home was peaceful, the radio playing classical music, the city settling into sleep. But at a red light, Caleb noticed something in his rearview mirror, a man in a car behind him. watching. For a moment, the old fear sparked, the instinct to run, to hide. Then the man smiled, gave a small salute, and turned away. It was one of his patients, a veteran he had operated on last month, acknowledging the doctor who had given him back the use of his legs. Caleb returned the salute and drove on, understanding finally that visibility wasn't always danger sometimes. It was connection, community, purpose. At home, Nora was still awake, working on a new painting by lamplight. This one showed a man in scrubs, standing in an operating room, but through the window, you could see the same man as a janitor, as a soldier, as a father. All the versions of him existing simultaneously, no longer hidden from each other. "It's you, Dad," she said simply. "All of you." Caleb hugged his daughter. This child who had been his anchor through everything, who had reminded him daily that some things were worth any risk. "Tell me about the new dragon," he said, pointing to her latest sketch. She smiled, picking up her purple crayon. "This one doesn't guard against danger anymore," she explained. "This one helps people find their way home." As she drew, adding wings that looked like hospital corridors and eyes that held the wisdom of survived sorrow, Caleb realized that home wasn't a place you found, it was a truth you stopped running from. They had all come home, in their own ways, to the people they were meant to be. The city hummed its nighttime symphony outside their window sirens and car horns. Life and urgency, the endless rhythm of human need and human response. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new patience, new opportunities to choose courage over fear. But tonight, in an apartment in Queens, a father and daughter sat together in comfortable silence, drawing dragons that no longer needed to protect because the danger had passed. The purple crayon moved across paper with confident strokes, creating not a creature of defense but one of celebration. Its wings spread wide, not to shield, but to embrace. In the distance, across the city, the Shepherd Medical Center stood illuminated against the darkness, its windows glowing like beacons. Inside, night shift nurses checked on patients, doctors reviewed charts, and in the pediatric ward, children slept beneath murals of purple dragons that promised them morning would come, bringing with it healing, hope, and the absolute certainty that someone, somewhere would always reach out their hand to help. The dragon's work was done, its purpose fulfilled. What had begun in fear had transformed into faith. What had started as hiding had become healing, and what had once been a desperate father's attempt to save his daughter had become a community's salvation. The story could have ended differently, with violence, with vengeance, with the bitter triumph of those who choose darkness. But in choosing to save a stranger's life, in choosing to trust despite betrayal, in choosing to heal rather than harm, they had written a different ending entirely. Not the ending of a fairy tale, where all wounds disappear and all sins are forgotten, but the ending of a human story, where scars become strength, where broken people help break others free, where the very act of reaching out becomes its own reward. Caleb closed his eyes, listening to his daughter's breathing as she finally drifted off to sleep, her purple dragon standing guard not against external threats, but against the internal demons of despair and isolation. Tomorrow, he would return to the hospital. Tomorrow, he would save more lives. Tomorrow, he would continue building the legacy that had begun with a simple choice in a hotel lobby. The choice to act, to care, to remember that beneath all our disguises, we are healers or harmers, and the decision between those two paths defines not just our own lives, but the lives of everyone we touch. The purple dragon, complete now on Nora's paper, seemed to shimmer in the lamplight, its crayon lines holding all the power of truth told simply, of love expressed through action, of courage found in the most unlikely places. It would hang in the hospital tomorrow, joining the gallery of hope that lined the walls, reminding everyone who passed that sometimes the smallest acts of bravery create the largest ripples of change, that sometimes the janitor is the hero, the CEO needs saving, and the purple dragon, drawn by a 7-year-old, holds more power than all the money and influence in the world. Dawn would come, as dawn always does, bringing with it new challenges and new chances to choose. But for now, in the quiet of a Queen's apartment, father and daughter slept peacefully, their breathing synchronized, their dreams intertwined, their futures finally, blessedly, free from the shadows of the past. The purple dragon kept watch, as it always had, as it always would, a guardian not of fear but of faith, not of secrets but of truth, not of hiding but of healing. And in that watching, in that faithful presence, lay the promise that no matter how dark the night, no matter how powerful the enemy, no matter how deep the wound, there would always be someone willing to stand up, reach out, and save a life, even if it meant risking their own.